Issue of religious freedom. Scott Morrison, Michaelia Cash, the Minister, they've reportedly landed on a model for a religious discrimination bill which removes the so-called Falau clause. They say, though, it will protect statements of genuine belief and faith. Under the draft legislation, Australians who reasonably express views based on their faith will be shielded from prosecution. But the bill won't protect speech that incites hatred or violence, vilifies or intimidates people, which I guess matches the provisions of 18C, which we know so well in relation to race. Now, people will have heard my views at the top of the show. Mark, what can you tell us? What do you think?
Well, it sounds a pretty weak version of the bill, much watered down from what they had 12 and 18 months ago. I think it's pretty disappointing. They've dropped the Falau provision, which most people would think was fair, that if you're a religious faith and you articulate those views well away from your workplace, you're not hurting the profitability of that enterprise, you've just said things that are consistent with your faith, you shouldn't receive the sack. You shouldn't be punted out by sponsors or anyone else, as Israel Folau was at Rugby Australia. So that's a major deficiency, I think, in this draft bill. And the other one, really, to override the states, to say that for instance, someone quoting from the Bible wouldn't be subject to a gay vilification claim at a state anti-discrimination board. Well, you know, it's a real rearguard action. It's a very defensive form of religious freedom rather than the positive form of saying that every state, including New South Wales and South Australia, should have very clear protections against religious discrimination, and that should be in tune with stronger federal government provisions as well. So I think this is pretty disappointing from the Morrison government. It's a real back down.
Look, I've written about it in the Australian tomorrow. The government staff I've spoken to tonight, advisors that gave me a briefing, they say that what Falau said would be allowed under these changes. They would stand. It's just not contained in an express clause. But when I had an exchange with them on issues like abortion or euthanasia, matters of faith, we know there's a lot of Christian Catholic hospitals, for example, the doctors would be caught there. They would have to perform procedures that they may not like. There's certainly no provision that allows conscience on these issues, but they couldn't be sacked from the GPs Association, or they wouldn't lose their registration as a doctor. So I sort of think it's as clear as mud tonight. I think it will be much better, Mark, when we see some actual draft legislation and we can pick our way through it. But give me a sense, you know Western Sydney well, if the government puts this out there and the opposition was to oppose it, as we think Labor probably will, how does it play out in areas of Western Sydney that are Labor seats but are a lot of voters of faith?
Well, if you look at the multicultural society, where so many migrant groups will say they came to Australia to escape a lack of religious freedom. They came to Australia to escape religious persecution in their home country. And I've heard them say to me umpteen times, what's going on here? The religious persecution has followed us to Australia. The problem has followed us to our new country. So they want protections. And I can speak in New South Wales politics that, having seen a Liberal government allow those left-wing abortion laws to go through, having seen a Liberal government now seemingly facilitating these euthanasia laws that will probably be passed early next year, to see a Liberal government in Canberra not standing up boldly and strongly on the question of religious freedom, a lot of those groups will be dismayed. They know they can't trust Labor. They clearly would be disappointed with the Liberal Party, and they'll be looking at minor parties, hopefully from my point of view, One Nation, to say, well, here's an outfit, perhaps against their expectation, that has stood firm in respecting religious diversity and the role of religious faith in our society. And I've got these bills before the New South Wales Parliament which would give them much stronger protection for their faith than what they're going to get out of the Morrison government.
All right, got to leave it there. Mark Latham, thank you as always. We'll have a look at his bills at another time.